Okay, so on today's weirdly designed episode, we're gonna talk about Melly Mel's conversation about Eminem and how Eminem's made it so far with his single Mockingbird being roughly high rated, right? So we're gonna talk about this, and I think the conversation of his race played a role in hip hop. I have pros, I have cons, I think I have a weird take on this, right? And I think it's solely because of how people view hip hop. I think that's the angle I'm coming at when I talk about this conversation, because I've wanted to have this conversation for a while, but not kind of have like news like this is broken out about hip hop, which puts me in a weird spot. Which kind of puts me in a weird spot because solely hip hop is. We talk about the roots of hip-hop, and then we talk about what hip-hop's been classified to and what it's been broken down into, and then what it's supposed to symbolize. We will be here for roughly maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe even an hour, truthfully, because of my understanding of hip-hop. And so bear with me on this kind of episode, because this episode isn't something that if we were to discuss it would be a short. I don't think by any means this will be kind of a shorter episode. I think this will be a longer episode, just solely because of my expression of hip-hop, kind of, where it's not the traditional sense in which we see hip-hop. It's more of a self-viewed version of hip-hop. And so with that being said, that's roughly going to take me roughly 30-40 minutes to kind of explain, and then it's going to take me another few minutes to kind of pin a point on what I define hip-hop as. So roughly with that being said, this is going to be a longer than stated episode, which I've stated before, probably fourth time recording this, but real quick, let's see if we have any sponsors. We'll get right into it.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Okay, and so before we get into this topic, I kind of want to come up with I don't even want to say like a subject or a opinion on it. But I think before we evaluate an opinion on hip hop, we have to look at the roots of what hip hop was originally supposed to be and what it grew into over time. And roughly, we can argue that hip hop has never had a very particular niche that it tried to fit itself into, but at the same time we can argue that it's supposed to reflect real emotions and stuff, and we can argue that many artists today are storytellers by nature, and by nature it's not telling a true story. And then we can argue about if Eminem was a different race. I guess we could argue that it'd be harder for him in hip hop, and I have some examples of that, and then I have some examples of it that not being the case. So roughly, when I kind of end this, it'll be roughly the opinion of the listener kind of thing, and you can use my evidence if you want to, or use my things as facts if you want to. And I'm not a rap genius or connoisseur, so take my metaphors with a grain of salt, because my metaphors will get lost in certain ways and stuff like that, and we can argue certain things or groups, and we can argue all of this. We can argue Dr. Dre's influence and imprint on Eminem post his career. We can argue all of this with the idea of a cosign, right? We can argue all of this. So we're gonna start roughly at the beginning of hip hop, and I read an article that roughly said that hip hop in itself, or hip hop music as a whole, is created through jazz, and jazz is the basic element that you need to make music. And to some extent, we understand that aspect of it, because without the trumpet, without the drums, without the guitars, without the saxophones, we get that soul blues. We get certain blueses to it. Like, we get the 808, we get the drums, the cymbals, and the drums again for a traditional 808, or what is originally called the heartbreak, the heartbeat or the heartbreak, or the classic being called the 808, right? And then the classic 808 comes from a machine that was coined by, depending on who you get your facts from, they will say that it came from a company, was the first person to create the 808. But then you have in history where other people have said that there was a guy in New York, a kid that had a Roland TI, what was it, 84? I'm not really sure what the model was, but it was a Roland beat machine, and he made the traditional 808. But then there was a company, the Japanese company, that took the 808 from him, and we can argue all that. Like, we can argue the emphasis of what hip-hop used to be, but we have to understand where we come from as hip-hop culture. Hip-hop in itself is jazz natured. It's the beat that a lot of people listen to, the dancing, the stepping. It's part of jazz culture. Jazz is supposed to be a dance kind of style, but that doesn't pertain to the beats that we use, the drums, all of that, and is incorporative of jazz. And that's how you get like the 808 and heartbeats. That's how you get all of this, right? So the question is, the first question is, are we wrong for giving people cosigns? Right? So are we wrong? So let's start at the very beginning. Hip hop in itself. What was hip hop supposed to be? Or what was hip hop and rap supposed to be in the early 90s? Well, one could argue that hip hop in itself, what was supposed to be in the early days of Grandmaster Flash, was this idea of a way to express yourself, the same way you express yourself through art, but the same way you express yourself, but through the words or music videos that weren't really around back then. But you express your emotions through music in that sense, and to some extent, if we go off of that experience, I don't see why Eminem's Race would play a phase in his career. But we have to take into account many conversations that people have had, especially when Eminem came out into hip-hop. And so that kind of leads me to this next kind of argument of if his race had played a role in it. And this is where we're going to get, I mean, this is going to sound political, and in no means is this supposed to be political, and in no sense is this me being political, because I don't really care for either political party. But the question is then, by that criteria of it being the way you express yourself through what you have experienced and what you've done, and a way to express yourself, I think Eminem would fit in there perfectly. But the question is the cosign, because as people have pointed out, and I would like to argue, that the cosign that Eminem got from Dr. Dre was because Dr. Dre originally thought Eminem was black, and so, or African American, depending on how you feel about that, because I know I have some people that hate each term equally in the diaspora that happened from Africa to the United States. We can argue all of this, and to some extent, I am not here to offend anybody. I understand both terms perfectly well, and I get the rationale behind both of them. But the question is then, why is hip hop, right? And this is my critique to, this is my criticism of hip hop. Why is hip hop only based on why do people only look at hip hop as it's based on race, right? And I think that's a different thing, because it is, when we look at it, the power of the cosign is there no matter what. Like the cosign, and people say Dr. Dre was at the height of his career. The height of his career when he signed Eminem. Besides the Chronic, I don't think Dr. Dre had an impact of who he co-signed as, at the time, 50 Cent. A 50 Cent co-sign was amazing. A Lil Wayne co-sign puts your career at the top, as we currently see today. That Lil Wayne co-sign did a lot. That Rick Ross co-sign did a lot. That Jay-Z co-sign with J. Cole did a lot, right? But the question is, are we saying that cosigns helped artists that shouldn't help artists. And I don't think that's could be true, because Snoop Dogg, Drew, if that's the case, right? If the cosigns are the issue, with that whole Eminem shouldn't, if Eminem was African American or black, he wouldn't be able to he wouldn't be as famous as he is. He'd just be another rapper. Okay, and I get where Melly Mel is saying with that idea, but it runs flat when you think. It runs flat when you go. It runs flat when you say that the cosign. It runs flat when you say that the cosign itself was the problem, right? Because if the cosign itself was a problem, we wouldn't have Drake, and Drake's Canadian. The Weeknd, considering how you feel about Take Care, could be The Weeknd's cosign, but it wasn't. Bryson Tiller, I mean, to some extent, he had a cosign, so we get that, but it's Wayne. That's the thing. Like, Wayne had a cosign. It wasn't a traditional cosign, but Bourbon was his cosign. But it was there, right? So, are we saying that cosigns weren't good for hip hop as a whole? And I don't know if we can argue that, right? Because I don't think race played a role in cosign, and I say that because Usher said that he could have signed Drake, but he didn't at the time. He wasn't ready to sign artists, so I don't know if that'll work. And then we'll go J. Cole and Kendrick starting a label. Without the cosign, would they be able to do that? Like, I don't know. And then we look at hip hop coming out of Grandmaster Flashes, and we look at the Black Panthers that didn't use hip hop in the song, but they used speeches, right? So speeches was part of that, but that was empowerment for African American people in the United States, and the right to vote and stuff like that. Like that's what that happened, right? But it's my thing, and this is my thing, and I think this is my thing, and people will, and we can argue this constantly. I think at that time the mafia was funding hip hop. And now, depending on how you want to see it, if you want to consider it was, hey, it was the more African American or the African based mobs, that's fine. But then you have to realize that songs like John Gotti got famous, but yet John Gotti himself said he was an American. Was a New York American mobster by nature, right? But he wasn't by any means African American, which brings this question to me: is if we're giving praise, and that's the case, if we're giving praise, and you're saying that hip hop or rap is a race kind of thing, I would argue that that's up for debate, because we've had artists like Vanilla Ice. Now, if you consider his career successful or not, that's not true. Mac Miller, Lil Wayne, J. Cole. This is the thing. Like, if we start doing it by race or ethnic group, we won't get anywhere in hip hop. And people say that hip hop is that, right? But Columbia Records, from my knowledge, I don't think it was an African American man at Columbia Records. I don't think it was. He might have been Colombian, but I don't think he was American. And then Rockefeller itself has tried to stay that way, but Rockefeller hasn't. Or a male-dominated sport, right? Rockefeller, from what I think, the current CEO for Rockefeller is a woman. Her name escapes me right now, but it's a woman, right? So if we try to break up hip hop into what people think hip hop is, we won't get anywhere. But that cosign that people had, like, cosigns helped people become celebrities. Like, that's the thing. And we've had this conversation before of, what was Michael Jackson? Like, was he Caucasian? Was he African American? What was Michael Jackson? What did he classify himself as? But as an artist, it didn't matter, right? Like, it was his art that said everything. And for that example, we could argue that Mockingbird, that song itself, now, depending on how you feel about the song, that's for somebody else's interpretation, but it is. It's a great song. He said that he wrote it when he was his daughter Haley, which we could argue that, it makes a different genre of hip hop, which is nothing wrong with that. The 2000s changed the genre as a whole. We had Lil Wayne, we had Drake, which is a more softer tone. It's more about love. We had a lot of people in hip hop change the hip hop genre in the early 2000s, and that's solely because if you ask me, people hated the 808. People got tired of hearing the 808. So my question would be to that is, do we think that Eminem's intro played a role in that? Now, this is the thing, and we could argue this roughly, depending on how you want to do this. We'd argue this with a few artists. For example, and I don't mean to mess anybody's revenue up in hip hop. If you're making money, this is not me intent on me calling you out, but it's a weird thing. I think we look at it, and I get what Melly Mel is saying, and that, for example, I will give Black Thought. Black Thought is lyrically, to me, one of my favorite artists. One of the artists that I think could rap for days, Benny Siegel. For days, I think he could rap. But we also have to break down that Benny Siegel, now if he doesn't know it or not, but there was a rapper called Benny, Bugsy, we've had mobsters called Bugsy, we had a mobster called Machine Gun. Now people now associate with Machine Gun Kelly, the artist, but there was a mobster called Machine Gun. And then for that same rationale, and Melly Mel said it, we have artists like Royce da 5'9", which people will argue is lyrically a great artist, but he doesn't get the same play as Eminem. That's fine. We can argue that artists don't get the same bagging or promotion behind it, but if it's a race thing, I'm not sure. Right? Because he's had more opportunities, and he wouldn't be in anybody's top 10, is what Melly Mel said. He wouldn't be in anybody's top 10. Now, for me, my top 10 is a bunch of storytellers. So that's Nas, that's J. Cole, that's Black Thought, right? That's Method Man, that's Redman. They're, to me, they're Pac. That's like Pac. That's Lil Wayne with his storytellers. That's storytellers metaphor, guys that are heavy in metaphor, right? But that's what I'm saying. And now, granted, Eminem would be in my top 20 artists of all time. But then he also made this a point that no one's blasting Eminem. I find that funny. Solely because I was blasting Eminem, right? And they said no one under 40 is blasting Eminem. I'm heavily under 40, right? But it's because that murder to be music. So I'll put it to you like this. I know a bunch of people that are under 40 that listen to Eminem. Now, blasting it, yes. For example, Music to Be Murdered by side A and B, I was blasting that. Drop the World with that Lil Wayne, I was always blasting that. Kamikaze, I was blasting that too, because Kamikaze is that album where you hear that anger, you hear that hunger, and I love that from Eminem. The Revival, where he talks about stuff that he wanted to talk about, and he had fun talking about, but he's a great storyteller. Now, if storytellers aren't your favorite, they won't ever be in your top 10. But that also means Jadakiss, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, they're not in your top 10. But did he have it easier? I don't know if he had it easier. I mean, everyone goes through life differently, and at different points you get a chance at it. Like, people will say that, and this is no dig at J. Cole. This is no dig at Kanye. But I'll use these two as examples. J. Cole sat outside of Rockefeller Studios for a week to get a deal, to get signed to a deal. A lot of people will say, well, I don't have that likelihood of sitting outside for a week outside of Rockefeller and not make any money and be able to live, for a month. Now, I don't know the actual backing behind that, but there's situations like that, or where Kanye says it in his in College Dropout, I believe, and it's the last song, is the last call, where he says, no, it's not even the last call. What is it? What's that song? It's not Last Call. It might have been. I'm not sure. But anyway, he goes into detail talking about how him and Dane, and he was trying to talk to producers to get him signed and make Jesus' Walk. And a lot of people were like, no, he's a producer. He's not a real rapper. Kanye made 6 studio albums, 2 mixtapes, and he's making money. Kanye is famous musically. Like, people have labeled Kanye musically as a genius. That has nothing to do with race, roughly. I don't believe so, because Kanye, to some people will say he's a genius because he makes music generally and he can do it. And then you can argue that's a skill, and we can argue that so we can argue that. And then we look at cases, and this is the thing. I'm going to bring up many different cases of where people say, well, race played a role, and I'm trying to debunk that. For example, Hit Boy versus The Alchemist. Hit Boy versus The Alchemist is my favorite, because I love The Alchemist. His beats are amazing. And Hit Boy's beats are great, right? But to me, I do love The Alchemist, and I will talk about it in another episode between those two, right? But it's the fact that The Alchemist himself doesn't get enough attention. Now, for better words, he's a underground producer to a lot. Like, people don't realize when The Alchemist drops. And that's weird to me, because it's weird to me because they're in the same profession. But if we go with Melly Mel's idea, right, The Alchemist should be bigger than Hit Boy. That's not the case, right? Or, for example, if we go with Melly Mel's idea of the concept and the cosign, right? Logic, NFT, and Hopkins should be higher. Should be extremely higher because of their race, and that's not true. I think Hopkins, to me, Hopkins and NF are roughly on that same level, and NF can rap. Lyrically, he can rap, and he talks about serious information, which leads back to that Grandmaster Flash's idea of hip hop, right? So we can argue that a person's experience plays a role if they're going to get famous or not. That's fine. I think that's fine when we look at rappers that used to be associated with illegal activity. We'll leave it at that. And then became rappers that way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was based on race. It was more based on hustle, like it's always been, and motivation, necessarily. I think that's seen in the Bryson Tiller case, where Bryson Tiller has also said that he was not going to release Don't, but he saw Don't doing so good and he kept it, right? But that's what I have a hard time believing. Now we can say race plays a role in a little bit of hip hop. That could be funding. That could be a little bit of things, right? Like the case with Lil Dicky. We could argue that played a little bit of role in it. And Gambino, we could argue that too, but Gambino, now that might be his actual name, but Gambino itself reminds me of the Gambino crime family that was in the 1960s, right? So this is my thing. If we talk about influence, and we talk about the idea that and Eminem got popular because of cosigns and because of skin tone, we have to leave out the fact that we have rappers that idolize John Gotti, and they say John Gotti, but half of the people don't realize that's the Godfather, that's the Dapper Don, because he couldn't get convicted on any crimes, right? So it's funny to me that we're having this conversation about Eminem and Melly Mel, and they're arguing about the conversation of if Eminem was only famous because of his skin tone. No, I think Mockingjay was one of his best songs. I think Stan is a great song, but I also think at the same time that Eminem and Lil Wayne song Drop the World didn't hurt. The song with Rihanna, Didn't Lie, didn't hurt, right? Like it may have got him some features, but we can argue that the Dr. Dre cosign itself got him those features because Lil Wayne, and Dr. Dre had the same model to influence other people to listen to rap, but the cosign's been around for years. Trick Daddy did it. Rick Ross and Plies did it. T-Pain and Plies did it with the song Shawty, so T-Pain could blow up. Like we've seen this for years. So the cosign being the problem, I don't understand that situation. But then he says skin tone, and skin tone to me, I I don't know. Like, a great example of this other Michael Jackson comparison would be Cordae. Corday's famous. I mean, he's somewhat famous, and to some extent, I think he's mixed. I'm not entirely sure, right? But I don't know if that actually works. 'Cause NF is great, and they all have their own separate fan bases. Now, will we say that it brought people into rap that probably wouldn't listen to rap to begin with? Yes, Little Dick even did it himself. He said he's not a rapper. He doesn't do this traditionally. And with a Snoop Dogg co-sign on that Fetty Wap co-sign, it helped Lil Dicky, right? He made his own TV show. So did Gambino. He made his own TV show after the song 3005, right? So I think it's a person experience that makes them do it. Now, granted, there's a lot of people that will go, okay, well, I'm gonna listen to hip hop because I haven't heard news. I haven't heard about this kind of hip hop. That's fine. That has nothing to do with race. But as Eminem has said, and I will quote him when he says it. He says it in a song that's on a Royce to 5'9", and he says, to come up in a world where I see Caucasian idols, and me as a black child not being able to relate to any of those idols, I don't see how I get into this, how I look at the world and realize I don't have to be better, right? Which is, we could argue that argues his case alone, that he doesn't see hip hop as a race thing. And to me, I don't see hip hop as a race thing. It's, if you make good music and you're a good storyteller, you got some truth to your music, I'm gonna listen to it. That's just what it is. I don't really care about race. But they say that it got him in higher roles. I don't know about that, because if we analyze Eminem's music coming up in his current music, people didn't like Revival. Revival to me is a great album from Eminem, but it's not because of certain situations. It's because of, experiences I've had that are similar to that. It's not about race to me. I mean, J.O.D. Kids on Drugs was the same situation, right? Like, I understand that story. I can relate to that, so I'm gonna play that. But that could be argued with hip. That's my thing. When we argue that it's a race thing, I'm not entirely sure, because Eminem's music is on that edge of, hey, it's okay, you can listen to it, or hey, he might be taking it a little bit too far. I don't think, like the same thing I've said, you can't argue Eminem's political sides in any of his music. He'll tell you straight up, he just does, he's very much himself, which to some extent, he said it, he treats it like, and people have said that have worked with Eminem, that he treats it like a 9-to-5. So my thing is, do you think that people shouldn't put in work for the craft that they're doing? Because if that's the case, that's fine. Eminem treats it like a 9-to-5, so we get it, and then his features don't always come around. He has to respect you to get those features, the same way as J. Cole, right? But I don't necessarily know if it's a race. Like, I can't see it being a race thing, solely because we've seen, and people will say, well, he's just addressing issues to pander to African Americans or Americans or Europeans or Africans, or it could be a whole race thing. And I don't think if we look at it, I don't think there could ever be a comparison to that. Like, I don't think he's pandering to anybody. I don't think he is. I truly don't think he is. I think he's making music that he wants to make. And after this time, you can see it with Lil Wayne, Eminem. They're doing it how they want to do it. They're living the life they want to do it. That's fine. But to say it's a race thing brings up some more issues with me personally, because I can't see. I don't know. It's weird to me, because the original comments when Eminem first hit the scene was, "Oh, I thought he was African American," blah blah blah. Right, because he was talking about relatable stuff to people and minorities, and that's fine. I get that, right? But it's, you base a person on their actions, not their words, right? And Eminem's actions in themselves prove that it's not a race thing for him. It's more about the experiences that he's been through, right? And granted, to me, Black Thought got famous after doing an interview with Funk Flex, but I've listened to a lot of Black Thought's music before that interview. We can argue this, and this is what I will argue. I will argue that the problem is the marketing of companies, right? There are just people that they don't want to market. They don't want to market certain artists because of this certain criteria. That's fine. We can hop in that debate and argue that Eminem probably had more promotion than other artists. But to say that it's solely based on skin, I don't think I can argue that, because even in that same situation, I would argue Jim Jones, Cameron, Dipset, D12, right? If it's solely based on race, D12 alone should be a top 10 band or group or music group, right? And then we have people like Outkast. Now, Outkast itself did the promotion himself. Anything Andre 3000 did, everybody was behind. So to say that, and Andre 3000 promoted Outkast, and to say that, we'll argue that New York or Florida or California promoted, we can argue promotion. We can argue that certain companies like Rockefeller, Columbia, Sony, they wanted to market people differently, but that's in Sony's rights. I mean, that's their criteria might be different. For example, we've heard artists before say that they couldn't drop music because of their label. Yeah, if the label doesn't want to put money into an artist, that's fine. That's happened before. But to say that it's solely a race thing, it bothers me solely because there's no evidence to back that up, right? Because Grandmaster Flash did it, Killer Mike did it, Jay-Z in itself is the prime example. I don't think there's many people that see Jay-Z as music, like a music artist. They see him as a businessman, but that's only because of the promotion that's behind Jay-Z's music. I guarantee you, the same thing happened with Kanye. Kanye had dropped 3 albums before, but the promotion behind Graduation made it one of Kanye's best albums. Or the promotion behind Jesus' Walk that wasn't there made Jesus Walks a masterpiece, a rare requirement for Kanye. But we could argue that My Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye, it took some time. It took some things to bend for him to become famous. But that's because Kanye had a different promotion style back then. I don't know if we could argue that. I don't think we can argue Eminem's race played a role in it. I solely don't, because then we get into artists. And I know you know what I'm doing. And I know people like Wale say it's because of his skin tone. And I would hold that up with Eminem, and I would hold that up with Wale and go, Wale, that's cool. I mean, besides Flower Bomb, you're a cool artist, and don't get me wrong, I listen to a lot of your music, but you're not lyrical to me as like an Eminem on Recovery, which Not Afraid that was a major hit in 2004, and that was under Aftermath. For example, with Killshot, he just shows how lyrical he is in a diss track, which to some extent, if you're battle rapping, you're getting famous. And that goes with Dumbfounded, right? Like, Dumbfounded himself is not African American. He might be Korean American. I'm not sure how he classifies himself, but Dumbfounded himself is, he wasn't marketed as much until he got into like the movie scene and when he got into the acting role. But him as a battle rapper, amazing to me. Arsenal, great artists. Who am I thinking of? Hitman Holla. He's on a show with Nick Cannon called Wild 'N Out, but that's just, that's there. The case could be made that they're two different artists, right? Because Eminem, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, Eminem has great albums, which I don't know if we can dismiss because we think that it doesn't deserve what it deserves. Curtain Call was a great album. Recovery was a great. Like, that's my thing. I don't know if we can go solely because this is the reason why. I don't know. That's a slippery slope for me because you have to back it up, and I think you can back it up to a certain degree, but then you get to people like the Alchemist and Hit Boy, and you're like, well, if that logic still fits, the Alchemist should be on top of his game right now. The Alchemist is great, but I don't think many people know him as they do compare him to Hit Boy. I'm trying to think. Flex versus Paul. I don't know. Like, that's my thing. I don't know. And we could argue that we could argue that Eminem brings a different base into hip hop. That's fine. But I'm not sure if I could say that is solely based on a race. I don't know. I don't know, because if that is, that's what I'm saying. Like, if that's the case, through history, we've seen that that's not true. Because ideally, we'll go with two presidents that's for argument's sake are similar. That'll be Kennedy and Barack Obama. I think you like them. You either like one of them for one thing or another, or you don't. It's not based on race. I think it's more based on policy or what they believe in or their experiences. I mean, if you're very proud military, you might go, you know what, the Kennedy family has served the military for years. Cool. Through that experience, I connect with them. If you're more, hey, we want to fix this on a local level, like if we want to fix this on a local level, that's what I'm going for. It's not necessarily like Eisenhower. It's not like, it's like the Roosevelts. They've been Teddy. We've had different Roosevelts. We've had different Bushes. It's just who you kind of prefer. It's who you relate to more. It's not necessarily race. I mean, granted, if we argue it's about race, I'd still argue that it just falls flat to me. I don't know. Like, for example, to me, two different but great speeches I've heard from James Baldwin. James Baldwin gives great speeches on the speech of it was the Cambridge debate, right? And then if we go with another speaker, who's another speaker that I think fits well? Now, you know what? I'll go back to the president's debate. They were both liked by they were on their campaigns, Kennedy and Obama. They were liked because of how they were seen, they were seen as the people that would bring communities together, which you could argue that there's no, that's my thing. I don't know. I get it, and I've heard people argue that Melly Mel is just doing this to get recognition, but I don't know. I don't know. If you're not looking for artists because you can't relate to it or you're tired of a beat, I doubt anything's gonna change that. I just don't know if we can say race is the only thing that played a factor in it. Now, I'm not saying I had the best childhood or the worst childhood. I had a okay one, right? But it's who you relate to more. I think, for example, I relate to Royce the 5'9" on certain things. I relate to Black Thought on certain things. I also relate to Eminem on certain things. I also relate to NF on certain things, and agree with NF on certain lyrics that he said, like Hope, Logic's understanding of the suicide rate, right? There are things that I've experienced that I personally agree with, right? But it's not necessarily based on race. I think that's clear with, that's clear with me, and it's only because I like different artists. For example, I'll bring this nationally. I like Cat Burns. I like Storms, right? Little Sims. I like Stromae, right? That's French, but we'll get into that. That's what I'm saying. If we make it basically off of race, I don't know. You could give me a Canadian artist that isn't African American, I would probably still enjoy it, right? Because it's the scene of Canada. Now, granted, do they have the promotion budget of Drake or the Weeknd? Probably not. So that's what I'm saying. It relies more on marketing for me, right? But Little Sims, Storms, Cat Burns, the promotional budget was there. I think that's the thing. It's just how much promotional budget do you have? It's not necessarily based on race, and I think I keep hammering that point home. But it's something that I keep looking at. I keep trying to figure out a point where that matches. Besides Eminem, when we take him out of the equation, what, Adele and Taylor Swift? I mean, that's national, right? That's national. What Adele, they do similar stuff. I think that's true. Okay, we'll go, and this is a stretch, and I am aware this is a stretch, but it's like Beyonce and Taylor Swift. You have a preference on who you like. Taylor Swift tells more about their art, more about the experience, more about the art. Beyonce is more of, hey, we know her voice is powerful, so that's why we like her. You know, whoever you prefer, whoever experience you prefer more, right? Like, I think that's why Beyonce's songs like Lemonade or Single Ladies is popular, because people could relate to it at the time, not because of her race. The same with Taylor Swift, the same with Adele. I think people just relate to certain experiences, like Hello by Lionel Richie, that Adele made a song named Hello, and people just flock to it. Like, it's, to say race doesn't play a role, that's fine. We can argue maybe that marketing doesn't want to promote certain artists because of this, and that, right? That's fine. We can argue that. But that's a marketing problem. That's not a race problem based on hip-hop. That's just more of a marketing problem, right? Because if they don't want to market me, how am I at fault because they don't want to market you, but they want to market me? Now, we might have similar resumes. We might come from two different paths. But if they want to market me more because they think they can relate to me more and they think the general public will relate to me more, how is that my problem? And I think, and that seems a little braggadocious, right? But it's a weird thing because marketing overall, the CEOs and the listening boards pick who they want to listen to. And for that example, I'm going to bring up the Temptations, right? If we argue that race plays a factor, then the Temptations shouldn't be a thing. The Jackson 5 shouldn't be a thing. Right? And we could argue that Outkast, if we base off of race, shouldn't be a thing, but it's in the South. Like, Atlanta got Outkast very popular. Atlanta, Florida, we'll go Georgia, Florida, Louisiana made Outkast popular, but if we base off of race solely, they shouldn't be popular, because in the South, why were they listening to certain people? Like, I don't know. Like, if this was any other topic, maybe we could argue it. If it was in literature, maybe we could argue that. But I don't know in hip hop, which hip hop is so subjective. Because I could argue, and this is my thing, I could argue the idea of taking the 808 out of music made people want to listen to music more because they want to listen for a drum, a snare, and a drum again, right? But we could theorize why Eminem's more famous, and I think that could be solely because he doesn't use the 808. And if you're not from the North, you don't like the 808. I know a lot of people from the South just don't like the 808. The 808 is cool. It's fine. It's a unique style, but it's not something that people want to constantly listen to. I mean, for example, me personally, I think there are a few artists that benefit from the 808. Right? The 808 of an introduction, the chorus, the bridge, cool. I think that's great. But I think there are some artists that don't necessarily like that 808. Like, example, like Plies doesn't refer to 808. NF doesn't really rely on the 808, but he can make the 808, if he needs to, he can do the 808 and make it perfect, right? But it's kind of what you prefer. Like, dancehall, for example, is an art solely based on dance. It's not based on the artist. I think because that a prime example would be like Bad Bunny being big would be, which you would say it's based on a region. Sure, we could argue it was even based on a region. I think because the South, from what I can tell, don't like the 808 because it busts out our speakers, but it also isn't something. Hey, we're like, you know what? We got to listen to that 808 because the 808 is so original. In the North, you'll always hear the 808, but it's definitely like it becomes we're falling into a stereotype when we say that hip hop is solely or rap is solely based on race. Like, we could have this whole debate, and it does fall flat to me because if we argue that standpoint alone, we argue that I don't know. We argue ourselves into a standpoint where we've heard people and artists in the UK even say, while they said it in the United States, the game might have said it, and to some extent we've proven that's not the case, and it's solely because every artist has their own style. For example, that's a great example. Eminem and The Game. The Game tried to do what Eminem did, and just go orange forward, tried to orange forward, and tried to mock Eminem's flow. He just couldn't do it. It's not. The Game, from my knowledge, has not been a battle rapper, so he doesn't understand trying to make a beat flow, like trying to make it hit every beat of a drum, right? Like, and so that thing that Eminem has, that experience that Eminem has in battle rap, it just kind of brings, hey, okay, so he can mess with words how he wants to, and he can tell us on the fly. Or Jay-Z, for example, Jay-Z being able to freestyle a whole song. That's just unique. That's unique to Jay-Z's experience. If everybody else tried to freestyle a song, like Lil Wayne, it's gonna sound different. They're two very different artists, two very different experiences. Lil Wayne said it himself. He said that he doesn't see race because of life experiences that he's had. So could we argue that marketing and the labels themselves see different experiences and think that different experiences will sell compared to others? Yes. Is that a race thing? Sure, we could say it plays a role in how they market people. Sure, because you wouldn't want to market Vanilla Ice at a battle rap competition, because who cares about Vanilla Ice in the battle rap scene? Cool, we could argue who would if you're having a kids party, you might not want Megan Thee Stallion there, or Lil Nas X there, right? Because and that falls under that falls under a stereotype. I mean, personally, I don't really care for either artist, but it's like, hey, if you're having a kids party, you might not want them there. That's cool. We won't put them as kid event artists. That's fine. That's marketing. Hey, you know what? You might not be the best for this kind of party or this celebration. Cool, I understand that. That's more of a marketing thing. Like, hey, who do we think you will relate to more? Not, hey, we think because of your skin tone, we're going to put more promotion on you. Because if that's the case, we could argue that Jay-Z's promotion itself, from being an RA at Rockefeller Nation, gave him more ways to promote himself through the stream compared to Nas when he was signed to a label and he wasn't the AR. We argue that Cam was in the same spot as Jay-Z years ago, but Cam didn't push his music out as much, and he was on other people's music at Rockefeller, and so Cam's music wasn't pushed through, right? It's not solely, I don't know, like, we've heard people have hard feelings about Rockefeller, and we've heard people say they had strong feelings with Columbia Records, Sony Records, like, we've heard it all before, but, like, I don't know if we could say it's I don't know if it's a race thing. It's who you would equate to. Like, Sam Smith, you wouldn't want Sam Smith at a rap concert with Drake, Kevin Gates, and J. Cole, because Sam Smith looks out of place between a bunch of rappers and singers, between Drake, depending on if he raps. He kind of looks out of touch, right? I don't know, like, it's a weird thing to me, because I've had this conversation before, and I don't know how I feel about it, because it seems like it's a topic that always comes up every couple of years, and we argue the same points of, it's only based on, I don't know. I really don't know. Because Sam Smith, the change is going to come. What is it? Sam's Cook. A change is coming. I don't know if we argue that if, I don't know, if Adele sung it, it would be any different. I mean, the tones, of course, would change. The person that wanted to pay attention to it might change, but it's not, it's weird. Like, it's certain songs, when, for example, people co-write songs for everybody else. Tim's and Rihanna, the song Lift Me Up is a great example of that too. Tim's vocally probably would be the best best because over her experiences, we've seen that she is able to carry certain notes to different tones. Rihanna, not so much. We've seen this from experience. We know experimentally wise, Tim's is more experimental than Rihanna. We've seen this before, and they have two different experiences and two different ways of doing it, right? So it's just overall, I'd say it's more about the experience and who you relate to more than it's more about race. I don't know, cause I don't know. You give me an artist. I don't know. That's what I might do. I'm gonna do an episode where you give me an artist, I listen to it live, and just give me my full opinion straight off the blue, and just see what happens. But I don't know. It solely wouldn't be on race how I would pick that. I don't know. That's a great question, but I don't know if it's all for race.